This is part 2 of one of the most horrific crimes in Utah's history. When police arrive on scene at the Hi-Fi Audio Store on August 22nd, 1974, they are shocked when looking at the aftermath of a robbery that turned into a 2-hour torture session for 5 innocent and random people. 2 of which were found dead on the scene, while 1 victim died on their way to the hospital, while 2 barely survived and were left with lifelong complications and chronic pain. From that moment, a manhunt begins, and within hours, police receive a tip that leads them to Hill Air Force Base. On-site, police also search a dumpster after 2 teenage boys find the belongings of the victims in it. Also, police speak with an Air Force officer who shares that 2 fellow airmen, Dale and William, were just watching the movie called Magnum Force. And in it is a torture scene that involves Drano, which is very similar to what just happened with the crimes. Police quickly obtain a search warrant and go into Dale's barracks, and when they go and pick up the carpet, they find a folded piece of paper. It turns out that it's a lease agreement for a storage unit that's only a block away from the Hi-Fi Audio shop where all the crimes were committed in the first place. Police then go to the unit and find it filled with stolen merchandise from the store. Dale, the one who physically pulled the trigger for all 5 victims, was quickly arrested, but so was William, who was the main accomplice. And the getaway driver who remained in the van the entire time was also arrested. In the end, he testifies against William and Dale. He still receives jail time, but is then released after he serves his time. Although thankfully, Dale and William are not let off the hook. During the court case, Dale shares, "I just continued shooting. I figured I had shot Carol, so I just started shooting everybody else." He also shares details about when he forcefully poured the Drano down the victims' throats, the noises that they made. And I quote, "I remember the noise they were making, the sound of pain, really." Ultimately, Dale is executed by lethal injection, but this isn't until years later. This occurs in 1987, although in prison he claims to have found God. Don't you love when they do that? Although during my research I never saw a formal apology to the victims or to the families of the victims, or ever him showing remorse for that matter. While his accomplice William was also sentenced to death, although he continued to appeal this for 5 years. Unlike Dale, he did say that he was remorseful for what he did, and he did not technically pull the trigger in the end, although he was a very active accomplice for the entire 2-hour torture session. He helped hold the victims down and hold their mouths open while they poured Drano down them. In 1992, he officially receives his lethal injection and he is killed. In the end, both men had painless deaths. Although it's too bad that their victims did not have that luxury, but instead suffered extensive and excruciating burns from being forced to drink liquid Drano as the 2 men held them down and poured it down their throats, causing their flesh to burn, blister, and peel from their mouths and faces as it burned through their throats and stomach before they were all shot. I also can't help but mention the 19-year-old victim Michelle, who I read had only worked at the shop for a week, was recently engaged. She was brutally assaulted repeatedly in a very horrific way that I can't go into detail with. Dale grabbed her face first and threw her down into the pool of blood of the other victims before shooting her. And for Father Oren, he had to see his own son die in front of him, as well as suffer his own extensive burns to his mouth, then being shot, then being strangled with a cord, and then from there, a pen was placed in his eardrum and it was stomped on multiple times until it pierced through his eardrum and went through the other side of his throat. And that the other survivor, Courtney, had to witness his mother dying in front of him. He was in the ICU for 7 months and suffered permanent brain damage. At this point, both survivors have passed away, and cases like this really just go to show what humans are capable and willing to do to each other.